And we're back. Part 2. So leaving off or picking up where we left off, we have, Miranda being really kind of nasty. Like, nasty. I mean, she swears when she calls Carrie that, like, oh, I didn't blame him, and I ended things with Steve, and now I'm in a rom-com, and I didn't blame him, and, he took it well. You were nasty at the beginning. I mean, play back that episode 8, and, you're kind of screaming at him, like, put your hearing aids in. Like, you seem like one of those, bitter old ladies that has had it. I just feel like there was a different approach, especially if you knew what you were about to do, and basically deflate his world or concept of you of what he thought where the marriage was. You just kind of sideswiped him quickly just because you are enamored with somebody new. Which, not for nothing, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people, other reviewers have said it. And I'm sorry, I know that the entire team, I saw the documentary soon after the show wrapped, and I can see the effort that they put into this show with the writers and the wardrobe and the sound. It was a whole collective. Yes, that's how you make a show. But was the information necessarily there? I mean, was the story necessarily there? And this relationship between Che and Miranda seems very forced. And it has nothing to do with her being non-binary. And, from what I gather and just reviewing old episodes, I think those inclinations of perhaps Miranda being perhaps bi or lesbian, there were inklings of that there in the series. They just pushed more of Steve onto us as an audience, and we accepted him for what he was and his flaws. And not for nothing, but I think even like the way Miranda's character tries to rationalize her cheating still doesn't even make nearly any sense. Just for the simple fact that there's just always some like vicious critique when it comes to Steve. And I don't see her being as thorough, being the lawyer that she is on the show. I don't see her being as thorough when it comes to Che. You're basically being, okay, for instance, there's an instance where we pick up in episode 9, No Strings Attached. She's still very much drooling over Che, and they're eating at a nice local diner in New York City, and complimenting each other and being super sexy and flirty, when Che gets approached by 2 fans who recognize her from the podcast or maybe her stand-up, and they keep continuously making reference as they're trying to get their picture to post on Instagram or TikTok, how that they were big fans, but that their friends were major fans and slept with her. So you can see that she's openly not committed to anyone. And I think it's known because, like I mentioned in my last episode, they make reference to, they were under the impression that Miranda was in an open relationship. So an open relationship, she's letting it be known that she doesn't want to be 100% committed to Miranda. So there's already like some indication or hesitation that she is not that person that wants to be full-fledged committed to Miranda. But yeah, Miranda is in a fantasy world of rom-coms and Disney where she thinks she has found her life partner in Che. So that's an issue. And she even titled herself girlfriend. I don't know. I feel like these two have had like jumped into assumptions of like open marriages and girlfriend. They've neither on either side of the spectrum, neither of them have had an open conversation other than them just hooking up constantly. Have they said, hey, by the way, are we exclusive? And hey, by the way, are you in an open marriage? No one here has talked. They just kind of, it got so steamy and passionate, they just kind of went straight to bed and that was it. Which doesn't seem like, from the over analytical, anal person that Miranda is, or we've known her to be, it just seems so out of left field. So this is why I say that I don't know where they were stretching. They were trying to stretch her character. I get it. She makes mention like, "Why can't I ever change? And can I ever change it back? Perhaps even like, you know, there's your indication that she was going to change her hair color again." But again, I don't know. I just, because the reason why I say is because she's such, um, she's judge and jury of her friends, but then she doesn't want that heat back onto her when she makes silly decisions. Like when Carrie in this episode, or is it episode 10? They're gonna be, this review is gonna be all over the place just because I feel like both episodes go together. It's just the ending of this blah. Sorry to say, it just was. If they get a second season, I'll be very surprised. But there's an instance where Carrie is under the impression that because a lamp that like sits atop her, like she has like a little like shelf above her bed where she keeps like her reading light, I guess, and it'd be like a reading lamp and a few books. That people have also complained like, why is it right above her head? That thing can fall, which I agree. But there's this light that constantly flickers. And it's always like like at night when it's creepy, you know, a lot of people, you know, also make assumptions. And because of the afterlife, could it be that it's big trying to communicate with her? And here's the thing that I will say, that and now we're kind of caught as viewers and them as a writing team, because I'm sure the episodes made more sense when they had Chris Noth, you know, doing Mr. Big. That's the rumor mill. People have said it, that he was in a number of other episodes. It's not like they completely chopped him off after the first episode. He was supposed to make an appearance, a reappearance in Carrie's life, but that didn't happen because of all like now these allegations that have been coming out. So now the editors are kind of left scrambling, because now you have probably a hearty story that you can't necessarily fulfill just because now it's just awkward and not seen appropriate. So now Carrie's kind of like left looking at herself or talking to herself, and the scene doesn't make any sense. But the reason why I may mention about Miranda being super judgy is that now she goes and they're in some new restaurant. It's not the classic diner, because if you didn't know, FYI, their classic diner where they used to shoot as a foursome, you know, the property was sold, so that restaurant is gone. And you know, you can assume that they've matured also as characters. They're not going to go to the same rinky-dinky diner that they did when they were broke. Now they all have really great lives and they're wealthy, so they go to a nice posh restaurant when they meet up, and they still gossip. And while they're sitting there, Carrie wants to share her, you know, her suspicion that it could be big, and Miranda's so quick to like cut her off, like almost to the point of berating her. And it's like, girl, but aren't you doing the same crazy shit? Like, here you are blowing up your relationship with Steve. And I'm sorry, I'm on Team Justice Steve, because Steve doesn't necessarily, to me, feels like he's done. Yes, he was unfaithful, and they went through therapy. You know, I don't know if that has something, her decisions that she's taking on now with Shay have something to do from that timestamp, right? In the first Sex and the City movie, where we know that Steve was unfaithful. But they were both committed to making it work. But aside from that, I think he has like tried to remain faithful to her and be devoted to her and taking care of their kid. Not because he's, you know, not aging the way that she thought he would. He's not satisfying her. You know, instead of trying anything, you know, this is a side note, I will say, you know, I know we're in Valentine's mode, but here's a note to whomever, whichever spouse it lands on. And again, I can't say I know firsthand, but I've known enough, I've heard enough sufficient stories out there when it comes to marriages. You have to keep it interesting, y'all. Just because you're married and you've been married for X amount of years, you can't let the relationship go stale, because you are making then the commitment to not making an effort. So I think, yeah, I think there was an instance, right? She tried to recreate what she had with Shay, with Steve. But maybe you could have tried a few more times. Or maybe you could have indicated what you kind of wanted him to do that mimics something that Shay did. And maybe you could have made it work. But it was just so quick, and like, I just want to be done with this. We pick up in the diner, and Miranda's character has decided to pitch in with Naya, her law professor, who's working for a not-for-profit for women. I believe it's women, like, either they've been homeless or they're just, not well economically, so they find housing, and so they're trying to fix this apartment building so that they can have, better living standards. And so they decide to pitch in, though Carrie just initially just wants to give a big old check and walk away. Seema does it. She's like, I'm not getting my hands dirty. Sorry, girl. But nonetheless, and now here's the thing too, but we know this about Carrie. Carrie is not the traditional person that's just going to plop in some like flats or skippies to go paint. She's going to wear her nice, big platform shoes. That's what we know her for. She goes coordinated with her, overalls and, white overalls, painter's overalls, and her huge heels. So they pair off. And this is where I think it could have been interesting, and maybe the writers dropped the ball, because why do we assume that Brady is okay with this whole transition? Their son, right? Miranda and Steve's son. Brady's kind of like, at first I thought, ooh, is that a little bit of shade? Is he mad at her because they want to pair off, or they tell them to pair off into two so that the job can go quicker? And, like, well, Brady, you're with me because Steve picks Carrie. And he's like, no, I'm going with my girlfriend, da da da. And it looked a little on the, pointed side when he talked to his mother. But then we realized, like, as the episode goes on in the next episode, it wasn't that at all. So it's like, ooh. Because, like, why do we assume the kid is okay? Is he that into himself and that girlfriend? Whatever. So as they're painting, and this is where your heart breaks for Steve, because now Steve is left with a million questions, asking Carrie, did you know about the romance between my soon-to-be ex-wife, Miranda, and Che? Che is your boss. Did you know? How long did you know? And, you can see her squirming, trying to, like, lie. And then for some reason, she's carrying Big's ring. And I'm like, girl, the thing is like twice your size and ring size. Why are you walking around with this, knowing that there's a potential that you could drop it? And then as she's trying to evade the question, her heel gets stuck in a paint tray, messes up the shoe. She runs to the faucet, and there goes the damn ring. So here's Steve, who saves the day, and he just even becomes even more endearing. And it's like, it's kind of hurtful that you hookers know what's going on and don't fess up. But look, I get it too. If I was in the position, I would not want to be in Carrie's shoes, and I would probably try to squirm out of it, because it's like, hey, that's their issue. But you just feel for Steve more. And that's where I think the consensus on YouTube and on Twitter, I'm sure, justice for Steve. Because Steve really did not deserve this slap in the face. There she is, Miranda, going on and gushing about Che. In fact, even before this, she had gone to Che's apartment, and this is where we thought that Che was going to show her ass and have somebody probably in her bed, and not expecting Miranda. In reality, that wasn't the case. She just, prefers to be alone when she's creating or writing or whatever. And I'm sorry, I agree with a lot of people too. The jokes are not there. So, when Miranda pops up and she's trying to be sexy and spontaneous, she just looks awkward and weird and runs away like a little kid, like a teenager. Oh my God, what's going on? And she's screaming in the hallways. I'm like, really, girl? It's like an awkward nervousness that perhaps we don't necessarily outgrow, but it just looks silly on her. And especially since she's never been that person. I don't think in one single episode of Sex and the City, don't clock us viewers for being overly critical, because I can't name one particular episode where Miranda ever acted this goofy. And she's dated a lot of duds. People that didn't even know how to satisfy her in bed. Did she act as goofy? So I don't know where y'all went with her character. Rewrite all that nonsense if you're going to do another season of this mess. Seema honestly comes off like the winner here. She looks very sophisticated. There are hints of her being another Samantha Jones, a brown Samantha Jones. Very sophisticated. She sat her little nice posh behind in some benches smoking her cigarette. She was not going to get involved in all this nonsense. And she runs into a club owner because before all this mess unleashes, they were trying to get into a nightclub, her and Carrie. And they're just not used to this long ass line. They're the people that are used to just going up front and paying the doorman a few bucks and you get in. Well, apparently that's not how woke culture works anymore. And now if you even try to bribe the doorman, they look at you like, oh, like what? New York is still very much like that. I don't care what anybody says. We could be in the middle of a pandemic. People will still take money. So don't act like, please. So that was weird. And that she was canceled. Like she says, Seema says, was I canceled by the doorman? And Carrie's like, yeah. And then we realized it was Seema's birthday. She was turning 53, I believe, in the episode. And they go to some nice fancy restaurant soon after. She's like, I just wanted to dance. I don't like birthday parties, blah, 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 blah. So now she is at this, Brooklyn site helping Carrie. Not really. She's at a bench waiting for her friend and some really hot guy. I don't know if he's Italian, he's Greek or something. He has the most happening club in Brooklyn. This is a reality. This is happening everywhere in the city. Has a really great Corvette and picks her up. And she's enticed. And then to find out that he's the owner of this fancy nightclub, she goes back with Carrie and she is able to live her best 50-year-old self. And not for nothing, this is what I will say about Sarita. She looks fabulous. She looks really fabulous. In comparison, I'm sorry to say, Mark has not fared well. Years have not been kind. I'm sorry, Mark, but those are the facts. No shade, but Sarita has. She looked fine. And then in the next episode, when she's hooking up with this fine Italian Greek guy, we don't 100% know. All we know is that he calls her boss lady, and they have a nice sexy romp that lasts a whole weekend and then some. Yes, show us more of that, because I think that's what's missing. Again, I get it. This was Sex in the City through Lost, and that's why they didn't even want to call it Sex in the City. It was, and just like that. But if it gets to a second season, honey, we need to see more sex. They need to amp it up because this was not it. Now going into episode 10, we see that she's going through the motions. It's been a year now of Carrie's, of Big's loss, and she's still grappling with his ashes. His brother meets with her in a nice fancy restaurant, and again, these instances and reminders that they're like, they're like almost half, on the other side. You don't need to remind people that people are middle-aged. They know they're middle-aged. We don't want to be reminded about age. So I think that, if anything, that was the unsexy part. And that her brother is like, where's my brother? And she thinks that he's having some bouts of dementia. Like, oh, Lord have mercy. How am I going to explain to this man that his brother already passed? But it turned out he was like, no, where are his remains? Hello. And then she's like, yeah, well, I haven't decided necessarily where I think he would want, for his remains to be. But he's sitting next to a nice, beautiful pair of shoes. Come on, girl. Don't say those things, because that sounds bad. Even if we know you're a big shoe addict, like, don't do that. And they were talking about how, these people are well-to-do. So they have like a whole like mausoleum or something, a crypt, I think he called it, where they could put his remains, his ashes, and put hers, and they could be together forever. But she doesn't opt for that. She thought about it, and she thought, well, why not just pour his ashes over the bridge where we left off in their last season of Sex and the City, I believe season 6. And they're on that Parisian bridge, and she has, you know, this beautiful moment where they even kiss and embrace, and here, you know, he pops the question, or he invites her back to New York to come back with him. So we have that. So she thought that would be the perfect way to send him off. And as she's in the middle of all that, she's trying to come to some kind of agreement with the girls for them to come with her during what's her name? Charlotte's daughter's. Oh, sorry, not daughter. Her the Rock character. I'm sorry, it's hard. It's hard when you're not used to it. So it's like, but you know, her daughter, who's now doesn't identify as female or male, they go by they, and but they're still Jewish, and so they do everything in their effort. They have this splashiest of bar mitzvahs. They're having a day mitzvah, and that it's very LGBTQ friendly. They get a non-binary rabbi who I liked. I liked her character. I think she was really funny and hit her mark really well. And that she wasn't pushy. She was like, no, the kid doesn't know the Torah, doesn't know X, Y, and Z, so why don't we just do a non-traditional bar mitzvah? She was willing to work with the family. And you could see the bar mitzvah was beautiful and splashy. They had a coffee bar and candy bar and all this nonsense. And you know, Anthony's involved doing the bread with his bread company. Had all the hot guys with, you know, the sourdough challah and the regular challah for the traditionalists. It was a mess, but nonetheless fun. And then she, you know, tells the girls, hey, you know, would you like to come to Paris with me so I can do this? And then we find out that Miranda, well, before this scene, that she had gone to a bar to meet up with her Che. She still calls her Rambo, and to meet her family, where she, like, I don't know what the hell she does here. She does a whole show and dance to let her know, Miranda know, that